Okay, so I'm Julia Coakley, Head of Operations, and on behalf of the MGAA, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar this afternoon, How to Build a Great Board, which is being hosted by Newroll. I'd like to cover a few housekeeping points before we start. Please ensure your microphones and your cameras are switched off. If you'd like to ask a question, which will be answered at the end of the presentation in the Q&A session, please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. If we run out of time and don't have an opportunity to put your questions to our speaker, these will be answered post-event. This presentation is accredited for CPD points if relevant to your ongoing professional development programme. The video will be available on our website and uploaded to our YouTube channel, and the slides will be available post-event. Please take time to respond to our feedback survey, which will be issued after this webinar, as this will enable us to deliver the best quality events to our membership. So today's webinar, How to Build a Great Board, is brought to you by Newroll, and I'd like to introduce you to Michael Goulbourne, Head of Insurance. Michael leads the insurance practice at Newroll, the board-level headhunting platform, with a focus on recruiting board-level and senior executives for carriers, intermediaries and reinsurers. Michael has worked across the property and casualty and life and health insurance markets in the UK and internationally. And previously, Michael spent 10 years as a headhunter and member of the global insurance practice at Corn Ferry. So Michael, if I might hand over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen so that hopefully you can see a brief presentation. Can you see that, Julia?
Perfect, yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Julia. It's great to be speaking with you all. Yeah, as Julia said, I've been a headhunter for over 10 years, and I've focused pretty much exclusively on the insurance market, and I lead the business at Newroll. So we focus purely on board appointments, non-executive directors and chairs. And we've partnered with the MGAA to help member organisations find great chairs and non-executives, but also to help individuals join the Newroll network and potentially find an external board role for yourself if that's of interest, and I'll come on to that later on. But really today I'm going to focus on the benefits of building an independent board. And when I say that, I simply mean having an independent chairperson or a full-blown board of non-executive directors, depending upon the size of your organisation. So that's a bit about me, but my bio, as Julia's mentioned, and these are some of the organisations that we've worked with to help them find their boards. We're going to talk about the role an independent board will play within your organisation, how to determine what the specifics of that role should mean for you and your business, the challenges of finding and hiring those individuals, and crucially what you will need to pay them, and what are the best ways of finding appropriate candidates, and the benefits really of looking beyond your immediate network and people you may know already. So we thought it'd be interesting to see how many of you have either already built a board or considering doing that in the near future. So I think we have a quick poll question which you can respond to via Zoom. There it is. So yeah, it'd be great to see just how far along this journey many of your businesses are as well. So perhaps we'll leave that up for a little while.
So we've got 6 responses so far, so please do participate if you wouldn't mind. So the question being, have you previously considered hiring an independent chair or non-executive director? With the possible answers, yes, we already have a chair or board in place. Yes, we may recruit a chair or board in the next 12 months. No, it's not something we've considered previously. No, it's unlikely we will recruit board directors in the future. So we have the majority at the moment, 70% of those answered.
Great, that's very helpful. I think the first thing to talk about really is what there we go. What does the board of directors do? And this isn't overly complex, but it is something that's often forgotten by non-execs. The most important thing as an executive, obviously, to lead the organization. When you're a non-executive, you are effectively watching the executives and supporting them, challenging them. So it's critical that the board doesn't feel like it's their role to run the company. Some people make that transition easily from executive to non-executive life, and others, particularly chief executives who are used to running their own domain, may find that more difficult to adopt the same role. So this is very sort of generalized, but in principle, that is the role of a board, is to oversee the management team, provide support, provide challenge, don't shy away from tough conversations, and be able to manage the executive team when it's doing well, but also when it's underperforming. So quite a challenging role, but one which is often not performed well by someone who misunderstands it. And then in our experience, the effectiveness of the board you have is really defined by the individual. So the individuals you select, their skills, their experience, and their style will determine just how effective that board can be. And these are some of the key things we see as being critical to your board. So situational experience, do you have someone, are you looking to grow, are you looking to acquire and integrate new businesses? Do you have individuals who have experienced that at the board? The independent perspective, which is where I was talking about, do they really understand the mindset shift to be a non-executive? And we see the tenure in terms of which people are considered to be independent is coming down. So around sort of 5-6 years is much more the average these days, when actually from a regulated point of view, you can sit on a board for 9 years, although that's becoming less common. Are your stakeholders represented? Are your customers, employees, your investors? Do they have someone on the board who can credibly represent their voice? And then sector experience is obviously hugely relevant, particularly for an MGA or an insurance business. Someone who deeply understands that market is particularly relevant. But it can also be increasingly helpful to have someone who doesn't understand that sector, whether it's from bringing technical finance experience or digital experience. We'll come on to that. And then finally, cognitive diversity. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. But do you have a team of people who can think differently and bring different perspectives to the board? And this is the critical thing in terms of selection and how you can kind of drive that through a search process to go and find your next board director. And so I mentioned already, the role of a board is, the role of a non-executive is to not to run the business, but to support the executive team. But actually beyond that, you really can define that role for your own business. It depends at what stage you're at, whether you're an early stage company, whether you're a much larger business and you need stronger corporate governance and controls. So it does sound obvious, but I think the first step in building your board is to really think about what support the business needs, and then make sure you have a well-defined and legally constructed role and responsibilities for the board. So in terms of the oversight they're playing around financial planning, around making business decisions, that's all well defined. What we tend to see a lot of growing businesses, and I guess a lot of MGAs would come into that category, look to build their board with people they know. It feels quick, it feels easy, it's familiar, but really it's not the best way to identify and hire people who can drive your company. Actually, instead, if you construct a proper role, you define the skills you need first, it then helps you become much more objective about considering potential candidates down the line. So an independent board member is often a good way to hire in a skill set that you wouldn't have elsewhere in the business. This could be hiring an industry grandee who can give you access to clients or to partners. It could be bringing someone in who has situational experience to complement and strengthen the CEO. And so some of the skills we see, particularly whether it's a within a broking environment, within an insurance and a carrier, or within an MGA, are sort of typical would be bringing someone in from the underwriting side who has operated at a C level or a non-executive level and can provide you access into specific parts of the market where you want to operate. You may want someone with deep technical experience in a certain function, whether that's someone who's come from an underwriting background within the lines that you write, or someone actually who brings a strong actuarial and risk and compliance ability to the board to manage balance sheets. You may be looking to acquire other entities, and someone who's overseen that and integrated businesses would be very helpful in a board role. Increasingly digital technology experience is something we see. It may be that you need that at a board level to help define the development of your business, or indeed you may be looking to exit the business in some way, and so someone who's done that elsewhere, grown and sold businesses would be extremely helpful. So when you sort of package up all of those potential functional skills, experience skills, what it really boils down to is bringing cognitive diversity to your board. So effectively, this is the way that you can create make a team or an organization more than the sum of its parts. So that kind of diagram gives you an idea that if you have many individuals all with the same skills, the same competencies, the same kind of thinking style, actually there's a lot you're missing. So one of the benefits of building an independent board, and particularly looking beyond your immediate network, is you bring a mix of people who sense their way, who have different intuition, who can challenge the board's thinking based on their different backgrounds and experiences. And so there's a slight difference between demographic diversity, which is what we often think about when we hear the word diversity. We think about gender or ethnicity or age or lots of other factors. But actually cognitive diversity is more about the differences in people's insights, the way they think. But actually the two are very related. So often the way you think and the way you see the world is because your identity is informed by your experiences, the way you've lived your life. So the two are often very related. I think the critical thing is thinking about, do you have a group of people there who complement one another in terms of the way they work? And so when it comes to hiring your board, very common first response is, well, who do we know? Do we know someone who would make a great chair? Do we know someone who would be good from a finance perspective and could help provide us with some audit leadership? And it's natural. We're attracted to people who, psychologically, to people who think like us. We like to see the way we think reflected in others. It tends to validate the way we think, validate our own views. So it's inevitable that you will gravitate towards people within your own network who you feel will fit the current dynamic on the board. But actually you may be missing a lot if you're not considering individuals from beyond your network. And so how do you run that search if you are going to look outside of your network? I think the first thing sounds simple, but take it seriously. Run a proper process. Be very clear about the skills, the competencies, the experiences you need, and create a role spec against which you can evaluate candidates. It might feel overly formal, and I think what a lot of people tend to do is think about the individuals they know and then begin to shape a role around them, and that can be a mistake because some of the factors we've discussed already. What it also does is allow you to stay away from subjective, unspecified concepts like chemistry, like fit, and if you've got these defined characteristics, you're able to articulate why someone is the right candidate and why someone is maybe not is not as strong, and that's very helpful if you have multiple stakeholders who are all invested in the role, who are all interviewing the candidate. Try and look in the widest possible candidate pool. Think outside of the sector. Maybe you can look within law, you can look within accountancy, you can look within other sectors within financial services to find the skills you want. So it doesn't need to be limited to the insurance market. And then run a proper process in terms of the way you assess the candidates. So test them against those agreed skills, interview them in a well-defined way. It may seem unusual to be interviewing candidates this sort of seniority in a structured way and asking about skills and experience, but it's pretty important to do it in that way. It allows you then to compare candidates more objectively. If you're taking someone on as a first-time non-executive, really do test their mindset as to how they'd make the switch to a board role. This is something you really want to test with their referees, individuals they worked with previously. Someone could have made a fantastic chief executive, fantastic CFO, etc., but don't necessarily have the same skills and tendencies when it comes to sitting on a board. And I think equally testing their understanding of your business. A non-executive can really only be valuable to you once they have at least a grasp and an understanding of the drivers of your business, of your market. So even if someone's coming from within the sector, make sure they really have a deep understanding of your strategy, your challenges, etc. And then obviously personality fit, the cultural fit, particularly with the CEO, is the critical thing, and you do need to make sure that that's correct. Yeah, one of the things I talked about was what you need to pay these individuals. This might be slightly hard to read on this image, but this is from part of a longer compensation survey we did within the insurance industry. So across brokers, carriers, MGAs as well, mutual organizations. And this is the full report is available to everybody. I think we're going to share these slides. There's a link down here which you can go and download the full report. So hopefully that's helpful. I think the main takeaway here is the key driver of compensation we found in the market is size of an organization. Not so much the time commitment, not so much the scope of the role, but actually the size and scale of your business. And so that should hopefully give you whether you already have a board, a good benchmark as to whether you're paying them in line with the market, and indeed if you're thinking about hiring someone for the first time, an understanding of what you need to pay them as a market rate. And then, yeah, just to talk a little bit about new role, and I guess I've touched on the open hiring process and looking beyond your network and why that's relevant, why we think it's the best approach to finding great board candidates. And so I was a traditional headhunter before I joined this business, and so I'd done lots and lots of searches for non-executives. And the reality is, I think if you're looking within your own network, if you're working with a headhunter, the process is almost the same. They'll think about, well, who do we know? Who did we call on the last search that was a bit like this one? And we'll call those same individuals. And so when you think about the process like that, it can feel as if there's very limited talent out there because the same people are getting called and the same people that the headhunter knows. So what we've done is created a network that goes beyond that. So we have over 45,000 registered members within our platform, and part of the partnership with the MGA is that any of you can come and register, and I'm very happy to share a link with you to do that. The benefit of it is if you are to run a search, means it brings candidates into the mix who would be invisible in a traditional sense. They wouldn't have got the call, they wouldn't have heard about this role. And if you're a smaller business, if you're a startup MGA, it can be quite difficult to think about, well, where are we going to find this individual beyond our own network? To go and use a headhunter is very expensive, and actually to go within your network means you may find some good candidates, but you also may run out of road pretty quickly. So that's the benefit of us. It throws the net much wider to a candidate pool who is who's motivated, who's interested in taking on board roles. And then if you are looking for a board role yourself, absolutely the best thing to do, I would suggest, is register with us. And basically when you do, you just tell us what you'd be interested in hearing about in terms of roles, sectors and geographies. And this is just a very brief bit of our track record across financial services. These are some of the organizations we worked with in the last 18 months. And then the other thing we tend to do is work with a lot of not-for-profit and charity organisations as well. So if you're looking to build a portfolio career for yourself, a very good first step is to take a board role at a charity, at a not-for-profit organisation as a trustee. It gives you that external support. Time commitment's not as great, and it just shows in terms of future appointments that you've already made that transition from exec life to non-exec life. And so that's it from me. It's just, yeah, very briefly, just wanted to give you a sense as to why it would be beneficial to sign up with us, but also give you some thoughts on when you're next looking to bring in a non-executive, some of the best approaches and the benefit really of looking beyond your immediate network.
Thanks for that, Michael. So some interesting thoughts there, and particularly I think it would be only natural for a small business, or any businesses actually, to almost identify their target NEDs or their target new board members from people they already know, and that's certainly not a bad thing. But as you quite rightly say, the potential for the road coming to an end using that route is quite possible.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not a bad thing, for sure. I mean, I think if there is someone who's known to you and knows the organisation and there's a good working relationship there, then why not? Absolutely, it makes sense. But there is also a risk there in that what you're doing is kind of shaping the role around that individual and making it fit for them. That may not necessarily be the best fit for you and your business. And you're also missing an opportunity to look at talent outside as well. So we work with a lot of smaller venture capital backed startup entities who are looking for their first chair or their first board, or individuals looking to grow their board as well. And yeah, that's our strong message. Is actually the better way around it is, rather than thinking about who do I know, is thinking about, well, what do I need, and then you should do it that order, and then go out and find that individual.
Yeah, that's great advice. So I have got one or two questions, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So the first one is, realistically, how many non-exec roles can an individual hold?
Good question. It sort of depends on the types of roles. I think if it's a listed business, a public business, you really can't hold more than 3 or 4, depending upon the size, because the regulator will take a view on how busy you are and whether you have the commitment to do that. Much easier if those are private boards, and I do see people with 5, 6 private appointments. The real thing is to think about it in terms of time. So a lot of board roles will say they'll want 20 to 25 days a year of your time. Part of the survey we did, which you can download, is we asked people, what is your committed time commitment? What were you told you were going to be doing? And what's the real time commitment? And it's about 20% higher, I think, across pretty much all sectors. So it's more a case of, do I have the real time to commit to this? And then if you're looking at bigger businesses, in, say, for instance, the Lloyd's in the London market, it's probably more like 40 days a year if you were to sit on a managing agency board. So you can probably only do sort of 2 or 3 of those before you're almost doing a full-time role. And if you have a full-time role, then you can pretty much only do 1, I would have said at the moment.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question is, how attractive do you think MGA board roles would be for senior executive and non-executives?
I think very attractive for a few reasons. I mean, obviously the sector is attractive in terms of it's a growth sector, and I think there's lots of different opportunities. I think practically speaking as well, if you do have 1 or 2 board roles already, whether you sit on a broker or you sit on an insurance company, an MGA can be quite a nice fit with that from a conflict perspective, because often the businesses are niche. You're writing business in a smaller space or in one specific area, and so it doesn't conflict with the other board roles that person already has. So I speak to a lot of current board directors who'd love to sit on the board of an MGA. They just don't get the call about it, or they never hear about it. So yeah, I think it's very attractive. the other factor is, if particularly if you sit on a bigger business, the non-exec role can be very corporate governance heavy. There's a lot of risk and governance. You probably get a 1,000-page board pack to read before you even show up at the board meeting. And so it's quite a different role actually to coming in as a chair or as a non-exec in a smaller growing entity, where the role is much more around mentorship, supporting business development and growth. And so that's refreshing. You know, they want that contrast. It can be quite tough kind of dealing with the PRA and the FCA all the time. Actually something that allows them to get back to a more commercial involvement is very attractive.
Thanks, Michael. How often should you plan to meet with the board?
Again, it really does depend upon your business. I think you probably want to meet at least quarterly with organised board meetings. But actually, as I was going back to that role of more commercial involvement, I would err on the side of over communication. You can almost be in touch with your board directors once a week if it's necessary, sort of depending upon how involved you want them to be in the business. So I don't think there's any hard and fast rule there. It's around what works for you and the board. And actually, if the role is that mentorship and coaching and business development support, then people are very keen to be in touch very frequently outside of the scheduled board meetings.
Thank you. Probably two questions possibly rolled into one here. What are the most important qualities to look for in a chairperson, and is there any recognised training provided for a new non-exec?
In terms of the many qualities for a chairperson, I think empathy and EQ and that mindset that actually you're not leading the business, but you are there as a support and a mentor and a constructive challenge to the executive team. That's the critical quality. Somebody who listens well, somebody who can bring others into the conversation, can build relationships across your organization. You don't want your board to only be hearing about issues, problems, opportunities at the board meetings. They really need to be able to build relationships with executives elsewhere in the business, so that they understand what's going on. So I think it's more the sort of softer relationship building skills that are the critical thing to a good non-exec. Yes, there are many training things. The FT do a very good one. I think KPMG and Deloitte do some quite recognised non-exec training. And then there's various resources online. On our website we have lots of resource, but there are a few other sort of networks, board networks as well. I can't remember who the other one. Yeah, I think KPMG and Deloitte and maybe some of the other accounting firms do proper formalised training which you can complete. And also the IOD is a good resource. They'll do some training programs as well. Thank you for that.
It might be worth the MGA just peeking out and see if there's any of our suppliers who might offer that type of training or support for non-exec directors. So I'll take that away actually. Another question, Michael. Can independent board members be compensated with equity?
Yes, they can. Yeah, it's very common. Obviously, in public entities, that's all recorded in terms of reports and accounts. But yeah, in private businesses as well, we've actually done another compensation survey, which is more around VC-backed, investor-backed entities and what that looks like in terms of the percentage a chair or a non-exec might own. So that's not specific to the insurance market, but if anyone wants that sort of resource, then yeah, happy to share that as well. And what you tend to see is, as the equity percentage comes down, the salary goes up. But yeah, for someone who is coming into an earlier stage business where there is equity available, that's obviously very attractive. And we've put lots of people on boards where they've been willing to invest themselves and have done so. So that could be another opportunity if you're looking for someone who wants to have a stake in the business.
Thank you. In terms of the period of commitment, either from the point of view of somebody being appointed as a non-exec director or from the point of view of the business who is doing the appointing, is there a usual period of time that each party commits to, or does it work as would any a contract of employment work?
Yeah, I think more often than not, yes, there's a period of commitment that you'd sign up to, and it sort of depends. It could be 3 years. Some more established boards will have an annual commitment process where, you know, each year you sign on for the next year. So it does depend, but yeah, I think these are roles where you want to make sure you get it right when you hire the individual. And equally, if you are taking on a board role for yourself, you want to make sure you get it right before you sign up. They're relatively easy to get into, and they're not that easy. You know, it is competitive, but very hard to get out of. So if you signed up to join as a non-exec and 3 months in you realise this isn't for me, or I don't have the capacity to do it, it doesn't reflect well on you or on the organisation, really. So I think, yeah, from both sides, there is an intended time commitment in taking these things on. Unless there's some particular reason that it doesn't work out, that you should expect someone to be on the board for at least 12 months, probably more like 3 years when they first join. And then after that, you know, hopefully they renew for another 3 years.
So even greater emphasis really on getting the right appointment in the first place. And
yeah.
Perhaps one disadvantage for the engagement with somebody who is known to you prior to the engagement, that it could create challenges from a relationship perspective, as opposed to somebody that you're appointing via different channels who might not be known to you previously.
Yeah, definitely. And it sort of depends upon what you want the person to do. So I think if sometimes we do see people coming in as this is particularly true in brokers, coming in as a chairman in title, but the reality is they're there to manage and build client relationships and open doors, and that's a really attractive role for lots of people, and other people don't really like having their network kind of tapped in that way. So I think the better thing is again, define the role. If that's what you want someone who's able to open doors for you, then I think define that role first, and then go and find someone who fits that, perhaps rather than, you know, find someone someone who think you can do that for you. The reality is when they come in, that's not what they thought they were going to be doing, and they don't really want to do that for you, and, you know, there's been the miscommunication. So yeah, that's probably my takeaway is be overly formal in terms of defining that role, and then it's less likely that you'll hit the make a mistake in that way.
Thank you. Another question: how do you, as a search company, obtain feedback on the performance of the people that you have placed?
Good question. So we ask our clients. We'll stay in touch with the individual, obviously, but we will periodically go back and talk to our clients in 6-12 months and understand how that person has performed. I don't know if I've got any data on where it hasn't worked. I think, you know, for many of our appointees, we've only been in business 6 years, so most of them I think will probably still be in post, if you know, unless they've sort of left for another reason. So that's how we do it. I think, you know, non-execs do often have their performance measured if you have board assessments and board reviews, but really it's around the feedback from the organisation on a more subjective basis. You know, are they fulfilling the role that you wanted them to?
Thank you. So just on the basis of our delegates that are attending this particular webinar, what's the route that they could take should they want to know whether a non-exec director is right for their organisation? What would be their next steps?
To work with us?
Yes.
Yeah. So the process, in essentially the first step is that role spec. So as I said, I lead the insurance space. So any insurance role, what I'd be doing is working through the role spec with you and defining the characteristics and the experience of the individual you're looking for. And we pull all of that together into a spec, but also a bit of a selling document for your business. You know, why is someone going to want to come and do this this job. And then through our platform, we put it up on our digital platform, and it's up there for about 4 weeks. And as I mentioned, we have a network of members. So these are all senior executives and non-executive directors who've registered with us. It's totally free. It's totally confidential for them to register. And when they sign up, they tell us what they'd be interested in hearing about. So if they want to know about chair or NED roles in the insurance market in the UK, when we're running a search that meets that requirement, they get notified by email about the role. And then they're invited to apply if it's right for them. So the big difference between us and doing it through your own network or doing it through a headhunter is it's a bit of a numbers game, really. I mean, as a headhunter, I probably would have called 20 people, 30 people on any board search and asked them for their recommendations, seen if they were interested. We'll be contacting hundreds of people. Not all of whom will be right, not all of whom will be interested, but your chances of finding that broader candidate are just much, much greater by throwing the net much, much wider. And then what we do is once those individuals have applied for the role, we'll go and do our due diligence on them. So we'll speak to their former colleagues, we'll speak to other board members they work with currently, and get a really good picture as to what are their strengths, what are the things you might want to be aware of if you're going to hire them, and then work with you after that 4-week period to agree who you'd like to meet and who you'd like to interview. And then we take all the feedback from the candidates, take your feedback, and manage the interview process with you through to hopefully you hiring one of those individuals. So that initial period of finding you the shortlist of candidates takes 4 or 5 weeks, and then the interview process sort of takes as long as your interview process takes. But I'd suggest, once you're getting beyond kind of 3 rounds of interviews, it can start to feel a bit onerous for the candidates. So typically that can take probably another 4 weeks, depending upon diaries. What we found during the pandemic is actually much, much faster to schedule those things when everyone can do it, via video rather than having to travel to meet and that kind of thing. So I guess in the next few months, we may start to be able to meet face to face again, but I do anticipate going forward that actually maybe the first round of interviews you'd hold might be via video, because actually people are pretty comfortable with it and you do get quite a good sense of the individual. And then, further down the line, absolutely, you'd want to meet that person face to face and get to know them better.
Right. Thank you for that. Very comprehensive answer. There are no more questions for the moment. So if I can just invite final questions before we wrap up this briefing, if anybody has any final comment. Michael, were your contact details on your slide deck that we'll issue to our members?
I don't know if they are actually, but I can add them to them.
If you could, and you're happy for our delegates, our members, to contact you directly.
Yeah, absolutely. Very happy to talk to anyone who's thinking about hiring, obviously, but also if anyone's thinking about board roles for themselves, then please do register with us. I'm happy to talk you through equally, your approach and what you might be looking for. So please feel free to get in touch.
Great. Thank you very much. Once again, thanks to New Role and yourself, Michael, for what I thought was a very informative session, and certainly provides some insight and food for thought on the overview of NED considerations. Thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon. Please don't forget to provide your feedback on the survey. The link will be sent post-event. It is important that we get this feedback so we know that we're delivering the right webinars that meet your interests. If you've also received the MGAA member survey, it's imperative that we have your responses back on that, please. It really is a massive indicator of what you want from your association. So the MGAA exec team are really, really keen to hear your views. So if you have the member survey landed on your desk or in your very busy inbox, please do give it the time to complete that. So Michael, thanks again to yourself and New Role, and thanks to everyone for joining. Have a great day. Bye-bye.